you're a work in progress. And then slide your hands away from you and go back down to lying. So the going backwards journey might help you discover the trajectory for the outward journey. And the trick is to keep your head low until the end, and then it pops up and you find the horizon. Yep, and the right leg goes back behind you, is the counterbalance. Then the next time you come up to sitting, if I tell you that the next kind of evolution of this movement is that your right foot starts to think about standing on the floor, and that you could spiral up. Other way. Oh, everyone wants to flick it on the other side. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So you will do this. The word spiral encourage you to turn around yourself a lot. So you could do that. So the original coming up from side sit, where if you're facing that wall, then you end up facing this wall. Do you remember that one? So stand facing, let's go back the other way that you're more familiar with. So stand, this is just a question of orientation, right? Where can you start in the movement and grow it or not? So standing facing, drop down onto all fours and find your 4 points where your limbs are ready for anything, right? You know, you could launch off, you could go walking, you could go bowling, you could go grass cutting, you could go sprinting. However, what you're going to do is take your right knee between the gap of your left. Oh, now I've confused you. That's why I've got disoriented myself. Do that. Just follow that through. Good. Go and come back again. So your pelvis drops and your head comes up. Scrub everything I said before. We'll do it from this direction first. Now you're facing the left wall. And now you end up lying on your back eventually with your head this end of the room. Yep, there we go. Okay, so we've clarified that from yesterday. Now, with your head up this end of the room, find a way that your arms are above your head. You roll onto your right side, so facing the wall with the toilet door. Come up to that side sitting, and you don't have to do it in one fell swoop. You can grow the movement, go back down to the floor, come back up, and each time incrementally you get closer to the standing position. But as slowly as is kind of sustainable. And then when you're standing, you drop back down and then you spiral, float, flop. It's so much easier to do than say. It's a nightmare to teach, you know, from a language point of view. You think it's bloody hard doing it. Well, no. I'm the one with the tough job here. Feel sorry for me, not for you. Cool. Yep. So and now as you're doing it slowly and beautifully, and the speed of it is lovely, so your timing is so nice. Can you track the relationship between the pelvis and the head by sensing the back, which is the connecting set of bones, and this relationship between your head going down and the pelvis up and the pelvis going down and the head up. Sense your head and your pelvis. That's it. Forget the words, just do it. Because when we put thinking into it, some people thinking helps and some people thinking really gets in the way. So go back to the sensory experience. There'll be a sensory landmark somewhere. You can get lost in space. You know, you can if you add in extra spirals and you end up facing the other side of the room. there's parts where you get lost. You could go right around, or you could just reverse it. You could do either. So whatever you've been doing, do the opposite. If you've been going around in a circle, reverse, so that you're going, if you're rolling onto your right side, you come back down onto your right side, but then find a way to reverse. So that means your knees flip. Now, for me to talk it through, I have to watch somebody, because this is, like I said, it's a nightmare to describe. Yeah, you could do the roll anywhere. Yeah, language is a virus. Remember. Do you have a preference? Oh, sorry, Anna, you missed this yesterday. So it's just enough to do that flopping onto one hip. And it can be a flop to start with. That's it. That's it. Okay, so it's a little bit of a love-in happening. The contact impro girl can't help herself. So there's a bit of socializing happening up the back. The movements become social. So here's another variation. Here's another variation. So standing, facing the front of the room, the agreed front today. See how this is. So this is a recap as well, a recapitulation, a recap, a review. Drop your hands down onto the floor as slowly as you like. Find your 4 points, and they are your 4 points. Like, own them and feel kind of grounded in them. And now lower your right knee into the gap and sit. And now don't roll, just stay sitting, and then drop your head, lift your pelvis, and flick to the other side. Flip. Okay. Now he calls this a hop. Could you hop? So it means your leg, yeah, just do something with your feet so you don't end up pretzel legs. That's a different lesson. But you could actually hop, whoop, as much as is satisfying, and then go really fast, and then go really kind of super slow, like slow motion. Hop. And feel what happens. So go slow and fast with the idea of tracking your head and your pelvis. So and then every now and if you all stop and look at each other, then nobody will be doing it. So half of you keep going. Just organize yourselves, self-organizing principle, so that you can watch the way other people's heads and bums pop up and down. Now, the difference between the height of the bum and the head is less obvious as people get more refined, but there's still this very much, the ass goes up, then the head goes up. So, you know, when he's talking about the anus going to the horizon and then the eyes going to the horizon, could you have a sense that you could look with your bum, look with your anus, and then look with your eyes without being offended? Anna's going, what the hell happened in the room yesterday? We're going from orifice to orifice. We are working around the anatomy textbooks. You know, and if your self-image of where your anus is not clear, then that's fine. Just know it. That's how it is. If you're more like your eyes than your anus, that's fine. Sorry? What? Yeah, that's right. Scan the room with your anus. But it's only looking. It's not emitting. Oh, look, I had boys, fart. Yeah, that's right, yeah. There's a Billy Bragg song about blue eyes and brown eyes. But it's not about the anus. It's about blue eyes and brown eyes and tears, let's say. Anyway, okay, so can you see right? It's the head pelvis connection and other people, and then feel it, like sense it for yourself. All right. If the other person becomes your textbook, you only learn you can be informed by watching other people, but if you just copy them, then you'll do their way. You won't do your way. So find the way that works for you. Reference it back to yourself is what I'm saying. So that you're using other people to inform you, but not to dictate to you. So for some people, when their head goes down, they lose everything. They can't attend. And of course, once you've got that relationship right, you can start playing with it and it becomes very plastic and you can actually start putting modifications into it. But this idea of your pelvis going up in the air is very liberating for people, actually, without. That's right. Is it showing your bum? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So you yoga people, you're used to showing your butts, and if you want to be that as a salute to the sun, then that's great. Okay. Oh yeah. Very. Yeah. The spinning. Yeah. And you get a lot of momentum when you can flip the orientation of your head and your pelvis quickly. Because they're so powerful, this is really masterful spinning, and you get a lot of momentum because you're turning around yourself so much. It's very powerful, but it's also extraordinarily elegant. Like, you're all dancers. You can tell me these are the movements that excite the audience, right? When you get this kind of power and speed with the accuracy, they're very, to watch, they're very, I can't say it, but it's like that, boom, Yes. On your back. Be excited quietly on your back. So you're really inhabiting not only 360 degrees, but up and down as well. Can you get that? Can you feel how much your environment is growing from that really simple flexion and extension, lifting your head off, and we'll recap that again later today as well. But this really complicated movement where you're accessing flexion and extension and rotation in all these different permutations. This is the access all area card, isn't it? This takes you can access the vertical and the horizontal and everything in between. Bless you. And think about how we can, we kind of limit ourselves in our planes of action. We sit and we stand, so it's flexion and extension. So we go up and down. We turn our heads to look at, look in the mirrors of the car. So they're limited in terms of the movement being distributed through the movement, but kind of limited in their scope, if you like. And now sense yourself, the pressure of you under, the pressure that's created with your contact with the floor. And there's something that can be quite curious about this, is that when you might have come in and felt really heavy on the floor, like a lot of pressure. So some people might feel lighter on the floor now. That's their experience, because they're kind of activated and they're a bit lively. So if you think in terms of this equipoise idea, some people who were really kind of upregulated, if you like, would have been making very little contact with the floor. They're kind of lying, almost like they're pulling themselves off the floor, very little contact. People who are deeply relaxed, like totally given up, like a jellyfish, makes a lot of contact with the floor. And then there's this kind of Goldilocks, just right amount of touching, where you could equally go to sleep, like really relax, sink into the floor with sleep. Or I could say to you, roll over, sit up and stand quickly, like do that thing. 1, 2, 3, I mean it, go, do it. Yeah. What the? All right. So were you more towards the sleeping side of things, or were you more towards the getting up and standing side of things? You know? I mean, I can have a guess, because there's some people. Yeah. You're ready. It's equipoise. All right. So lie back down again. And now you kind of know what I'm doing. So could you imagine in this position going to sleep? Like what's your internal state? What do you do to turn this position into more in the direction of sleep? This, you'll go into some kind of internal state that takes you, well, hopefully quieter, blah, blah, more relaxed. So feel that direction of intention. And now, is that reversible? So you can come out of that intention, come back to that feeling of, I'm neither ready, I'm not going to sleep, and I'm not standing up. I'm somewhere in between, this state of potential. So you could see this, another definition of equipoise is this sort of state of potential. And now come into that position and stand up. Without your blood pressure going, what the hell? Yeah, sometimes our blood pressure, our homeostasis is not quite in equipoise. Now, of course, standing is not so easy to find equipoise about going to sleep. But could you imagine just going into that, which is not slouching, but you could go quietly into yourself, or then you could go for a jog. Why would you want to go for a jog? Some of you like it. So go sit, go into that state in yourself where, oh yeah, I'm thinking a bit of couch time would be good. Anna's thinking a bit of Downton Abbey. Going into there. Oh, no, I'm going to go for a jog. Jog. Yeah. Yeah, you already had the remote control out. And now slowly slow down and find the sitting, and then roll down to lying. You can drop onto all fours and spiral down. So you see how far you can take the reversibility idea. Is that, you can take any kind of extreme and see, okay, where am I inhabiting in these two ends of, this spectrum? Where am I inhabiting? With no judgment about one being better than the other. It's all situational. And let's just say now is not the situation where you would go to sleep, but maybe equally it's not the situation where you want to sleep up and do cartwheels. Maybe you do. It's that finding that different states are accessible, and then you make a choice. And Zoran and I were talking that, one of the famous quotes Feldenkrais keeps saying a lot is, if you know what you're doing, then you can do what you want. But Zoran, because he's got sharp ears and I haven't, he was listening. And one time when Feldenkrais says this in this Amherst series, he mumbles under his breath something about, and you need to understand why you then make that decision. So what's your motivation? So it's not a mindless doing what you want. It's then doing what you want for a particular motivation or reason. So knowing what you're doing in this context is, am I more towards the sleep, or am I more towards the jogging? Then you make a decision. What's right and what's your motivation? Oh, okay, my motivation now is I need to sleep, or no, it's not appropriate for me to sleep. So I know what I'm doing. I can do what I want in the context of the situation. You know, it's an informed decision-making process. So all the cognitive scientists are going, oh, this is marvelous, because you're practicing that whole cognitive loop of decision-making. Find a way, maybe the way, the way du jour of rolling up into sitting and then come up to standing. Oh, God, that's not the... You're funny. And sense yourself in standing again. How are things stacking up? Shift your weight from one leg to the other. Any more on your heels or more on your toes? Find a way to access all areas under your feet. So I do this a lot with my clients who've got balance issues with the eyes closed. How do you know where you are on your feet? So how do you know where you are? What are you sensing? And again, you're using a multimodal kind of approach. There's the contact of the floor, and there's the degrees of pressure, right? So it's not just contact or no contact. There's more pressure and less pressure. And you can use movement to really explore the changes in pressure under different parts of your feet. And then you can also sense, as your weight shifts, how different muscles in the front of the shin, in the back of the shin, in the front of the thigh, in the back of the thigh, and in the hip joints start working in and out, you know, becoming more or less apparent in their work. It's not like they're making big changes in length, but they're making little changes. So it's much more subtle. You might feel little things in your lower back, or, you know, what I see with the people that I work with is as soon as they stand up, their neck muscles fire off like buggery, because in their organization, they're using their heads to balance, not their ankles. So actually, that to balance, they start clenching their jaw and tightening their eyes and tightening the back of their neck and all sorts of funny business, which has got actually nothing to do with balance, really. So can your head be free to balance? It's half of the reason for these ATMs. So that your head isn't a balance. You're not using it to stabilize yourself. It's free to move. This is an absolute foundational mini aim in Feldenkrais, that your head is free to move. So what happens when your head is free? Open your eyes and you'll see. You will see. And you've experienced this a lot in the room now. So here's another extraceptive sense. The eyes are taking in information from the outside world in the form of light. So you can add in this sense. And let the light of the images quietly flood into your eyeballs. They are receivers. Just like the little receptors in your feet are receiving pressure. The receptors in your eyes are receiving light. And as you turn your head and you're receiving the external light, become aware that your ears are open receivers and allow sound waves to enter into the little canals of your ears. As you turn your head, now depending on where you are with the speakers, my voice will be coming from various directions, so that's really hard to locate, right? So some of you might be able to actually hear my real voice coming from my real mouth, but you might locate the speakers. How do you do that? How do you quest with your head? and you might hear the air conditioning. And again, that's different for all of you because you're all in a different orientation to the air conditioning vents. So you have the illusion of where the sound is coming from. So you'll look to the source, but actually you're experiencing the sound inside your head. But we're so good at perceiving that we create the illusion of where the sound is, even though that's not how we actually perceive it in reality. Does that make sense? Right, so we locate it and ascribe the sound as coming from there. Actually, the sound has to come into our ears for us to perceive it. So we're so good at creating these illusions. And of course, you can get auditory hallucinations as well. So people who have tinnitus, that's their ears hearing auditory signals. They're making it up. It's fake. Like the dizziness is a fake movement. And you can get visual hallucinations, mirages, and all the funny visual perceptual tricks. You can trick your brain into coming to a wrong conclusion. Now, we often don't organize ourselves in a big way in space around taste and smell, but let's just say you wanted to find a particular smell, which could get socially inappropriate. Don't do it. Hey, cake. Oh. Shut your eyes and what can you smell? But yeah, you could smell cake. I saw a cake. I didn't smell it. Could you find your mat? I don't know if this is so socially appropriate. How would you explore the smell of your mat? Do it with your eyes shut so that you don't feel so inhibited. But, if you were a dog or a cat, how would you explore the smell of your mat? And this is really not very human, right? We don't do this. You won't feel particularly human. And I'm not going to ask you to taste your mat. But how would you access all areas to find, my sense of smell is really rubbish. So this is, I don't organize around this at all. But let's just say now you wanted to smell the fresh air or something. You would orient, then you'd start getting up against gravity, right? And how would you turn? So imagine then, or, imagine, let's say that there's a nice coffee smell coming from the area of the urn. So imagine this coffee smell. What are your movements like around when your nose is the kind of prime directive? It changes your movement, right? So you're coming up to get mobile onto your feet because you want to move towards it, and then you're questing, so your nostrils are going left and right, so you're using rotation. Now, because you really want to use your eyes, but I'm being mean and not letting you. And Philippa's thinking she's won the lottery because she's right there. Sorry? She's near the bin. Okay, so smell is another exteroceptive. It's another engagement with the environment, right? So you need to be mobile to find it. So what have we missed? Taste. You can do that in a minute with your real coffee or your real tea. And then you orient, in quite a detailed way. What other senses? Pardon? Touch, yeah. Yep, so they're the pressure detectors. There's various ways you could, we usually call them tactile because they're the senses of touch, but actually touch is detecting pressure. Yeah, and then to detect texture, you move a little bit so that you feel the friction or not. So you can feel the difference between, so then you're using the sense of effort as how much do I have to push? So then the sense of effort, no one's quite sure how we sense effort, but probably we're sensing effort by actually sensing how much directive we're giving to the muscles. That's really cool. You know, that it's not even, that's a inferred sense, is that I am sensing how much drive I'm sending to the muscles to tell them how hard to work, and I'm using that directive to tell me a sense. It's very cool. So we're using the output as an input. Yeah, that's right, with the pressure stuff. Yeah, and then you've got, of course, you've got thermoreceptors as well, so you feel temperature, and then you infer. So if I want to feel how squishy something is, it's there. I shouldn't go into this too much, otherwise I'll rain on Zoran's parade. But see, this is squishy because if I increase the pressure, I get movement. So then I detect movement that tells me density after I've detected the pressure. Whereas if I'm like Sylvia and I press the wall, there's no movement. I press and the pressure increases and then there's no movement. So from that, I inferred this is really dense. We're marvelous. Philippa. No. Proprioception is movement, the sense of position and movement. And it's predominantly, well, in the movement part of it in particular is from the muscle spindles, inside the muscles. Yeah. So we get predominantly, we inform position with tactile, but more predominantly it's the proprioception classically is position and movement and direction of movement and actually velocity as well. That's proprioception. Yeah, yeah. Jenny, do you? That's so naughty. Do you know what? I've never actually asked, to be honest. I think the short answer is we can. Whether we choose to do it all the time or not, yeah. No, I get tremendous backache, actually, if I've got a really squishy mattress. My lower back just goes, I don't know where the hell I am, and I'm going to go into a little hissy fit. That's me personally. Yours does too? Right, yeah. I don't know. You have to ask. Lying on the floor is a bit of an art, and if you're very bony, doesn't matter how conforming you are, the floor is pretty unforgiving on certain bones. Now I'm not so bony anymore, so I'm finding the floor more and more comfortable because my inner mat is getting more comfy, let's say. But finding comfort on the floor is definitely something. Are you, who's experiencing that in the course of this 2 weeks, that the floor is becoming more friendly? Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 Yeah, it depends on the position that you lie, and you're right. People are more likely to need a pillow when they're on their side because it depends how much your shoulders can fold or not. And if your shoulders can fold a lot, then you don't need a pillow so much on your side. But if your shoulders can't, you're really on the point of your shoulder, you don't want to lie like that. And on the back, if your spine can go relatively straight, you don't need a pillow. But we'll work with this a lot when you're helping to find people to find comfort, ready for an FI. Then you look at where they need some padding just to support them, so they can really sense themselves without having big angles. Mm. Mm. Yeah, get Greek. Yeah, yeah. Quam. It's taste. Taste. Yeah. So I haven't. I'm going to let you explore that for yourself, because taste and smell are very connected. Actually, a lot of what we taste is actually smell. So I mean, you all know that when you've got a cold and everything tastes like nothing, because you don't have smell. So taste is very multimodal with smell, but our brain coalesces those things it creates one out of two separate senses. That's right. Yeah, for salt and sweet. And what's the funny Japanese one? Umami. Ah, yeah, don't tell me that because I've got a terrible senses. It can. Well, and any of the senses can go actually before dementia. Dementia is not a thing. It's a degeneration of some parts of the brain, and whatever part of the brain degenerates is what degenerates. Yeah, so it's not one entity. Yeah. 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 So it's trainable. You know, like we're particularly training the proprioception and the tactile in particular. We're really focusing on that sense. And of course, eyes, we're clarifying a bit. But, you know, a friend of mine, he's an oenologist, he's a winemaker. So I grew up with him, and his sense of taste and smell was as rubbish as mine at school. And then he did oenology at uni, and they have sense training classes, sensory awareness, if you like. They don't use the word awareness, but they have sensing classes. You think, well, that's just a binge drinking. But no, they train and they do it like we do. They create contrasts around saltiness and sweetness, and then they start getting into the wanky business of, was this picked by, you know, an old lady or a young man? You know, can I taste the difference? Is it a pick, you know? Yeah. Was it squished with the heel or the toe? Blah, blah, blah. But that refinement is trained. So he became, and then he became a pain in the ass to live with, because he became very discerning about our cooking. So, you know, when you're that age, we're all university students, and all of a sudden he just can't tolerate, you know, banging in the cheapest everything, you know, the tins of cheap tuna and, you know, blah, blah. So his discernment became a bother to us because he was so refined. Just like you're noticing that some of your discernment is like you're noticing things you don't necessarily want to notice, maybe. But that ability to refine the distinctions is trainable. And that's exactly what we're doing here. You're becoming the equivalent of a winemaker with these other senses. Oh, no, Anna, tell me. Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah. Awareness sucks. Awareness can suck. It can. Yeah. Yeah. It's about gaining control of our awareness, as I keep saying. Um, so that's the sense of taste. Now, can I just finish the sensory thing? Because I relate that story a lot when people are asking me, well, you say you're training senses, like they can't, because people think that they're hardwired, right? That I sense what I sense. So I use the winemaker analogy to show people that it's a learnable thing. However, one of my colleagues I was working with, who was, and he's an older guy who's was in the wine industry. There are some people who just do sense certain qualities that most of us can't. So there is some innateness that can't be trained. And presumably if they do the oenology course and they can't do it. So in a way, that what he's saying is that there are super senses, and I can't remember which super tasters that are, you know, just like there is, you know, the fantastic musician who you just comes out of nowhere, who's got this facility that's one of my friends in South Africa, her little boy, he was just a normal ratty little boy that I used to muck around with. you know, when he was 7, 8, because I was living over there for a while. And and then I didn't go for 2 years. And in that 2 years, he started piano lessons. And within the first year, he was like virtuoso. And you see him on YouTube now, this little skinny kid who's still ratty as hell. But when I visited them last year, instead of him just rattling on to me about all sorts of other things, it's like, well, you know, he actually thinks he's the reincarnation of Mozart. That's okay. But, you know, like, who's your favorite composer? And it's completely different. So his facility around playing the piano, it just came out of nowhere. Like, there was no real apprenticeship, you know, he just did it. Well, he's a savant like that. Yeah, that's right. So anyway, that's that story. So there are people on the extreme who don't need to go through this training apprenticeship stuff. You know, and I'd imagine that some of the dancers, you know, who have this innately fantastic, refined proprioception, that was innate, that it was never really trained. Let's say here we're training it because we're not in that super category. So now you can talk. Sorry. You did. Oh, has that? What was your question? Yeah. 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 That's right. It could. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's perfume, isn't it? It's the book. The do you really identify with that book? Yeah. 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 So that's the. Yeah. 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 So that's Kevin's visual. That you're the smell version of Kevin's visual overload. Yeah. It's fascinating. Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 A chapter. Only one? You know, we weave it in, right? So this time, the sort of, you know, you look, if you read the competency stuff, one of the things is there are foundation disciplines that can help inform, and we'll try and weave them in. So we don't want you. You can go off and do a psychology degree. You can go off and do a neurophysiology degree. You can go off and do an anatomy degree. That's fine. For our purposes, we'll weave it in here, and then we'll add to it in the online segments. Um, and, you know, as we've been mapping out the curriculum relative to the staff over the 3 years, I've tried to map it relative to our strengths. So just because that'll make it easy for us. So, you know, Zoran's got a master's degree in cognitive science, so he'll be looking more at the cognitive aspects next segment. Jeff's got a degree in psychology, so he'll be looking more from that point of view. I've obviously neuroscience, so that's what pops out for me. It's not, we can all do each other's stuff to the point that we need to in here. What you want to do in more depth, we can support. But it's not just psychology. You know, you could just as easily have someone in here where you go, well, you'll need to go and have a chapter on sociology or anthropology or philosophy or, you know, like we've been doing biomechanics or whatever. You know, Feldenkrais borrowed from everybody. Read the biography to know that. He was a magpie. And that's the thing. That's why it's so hard for us to describe this method, because he's just taken stuff from everywhere and integrated it, from the martial arts, from his the pediatrician wife waiting room scenario, you know, child development stuff, learning theory, blah, blah, blah. And he was an engineer. So, you know, it's a real minestrone. Yeah. 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 Um, it's big. It's a big question. I can only hypothesize, really. You are foregrounding it. And in some ways, there's a really complex process of disinhibition, right? You're letting stuff go, stuff that you might do habitually to close down, to make things. So one way I can close down stuff is I can actually physically close it down, and what I attend to, and it will manifest in my body, my attention to these other senses. And of course, all that's getting kind of freed up for people. So the whole environment is getting freed up. So you're moving more through space. So more you're able to be aware of a bigger space of stimuli, whether it's smell or sight or taste. So that physicality, when I'm saying you've got now the access all area card, you really have. And it's opened your world, and it's not necessarily easy to live in a very, very open world. So what you're experiencing now is a little bit like a child with autism. I can't filter, and this is overwhelming. So what do? I can manage this. I'm going to shut everything else down, and I'm going to rock. So I've got something to pay attention to, and I'm shut down, shut down, shut down. And if you drag me out, I'm going to lose my cool. So you could do that to cope with this being overwhelmed. Not very constructive, and it's not very social. And what's the biggest problem that people with autism have is that society doesn't like them. But it's a survival technique. It's one technique. So in a way, if we all kind of, let's just say we're all mildly autistic, so we all mildly do this, when, to close the world down so it's manageable in bite-sized chunks. And we've done the opposite. We've opened, you're kind of really, everything. So now you'll find equipoise. Why do we keep talking about equipoise? So that you learn to come back to some point where you can disinhibit in some areas and inhibit in others, and have that capacity to, okay, I don't need to attend to all those smells now. How can I direct my attention to just coffee? Or like Kevin had to do, how can I now quietly direct my attention? I background all the other visual information, and I foreground the baked beans, because that's all I'm in here for. Or Sue can background all those other things, and you're a work in progress, right? And then in Downton Abbey, you can background all the side effect noises and attend to the voice of your loved one or whatever. But it's still there, so it's the possibility. All right, yeah, it's the possibility, and it's training the awareness stuff, right, and getting the movement right between where your awareness is. And that's where mindfulness for the sake of mindfulness is like, mindfulness for what? That's our question. Mindfulness of everything is overwhelming and tiring. There's a discernment in our version of mindfulness. In kind of my tradition, mindfulness actually is the word for attention, and then there's the awareness of that attention that is more pervasive. Yeah. Anyway, that's enough talk, because you need coffee. When I say you need, that's a projection. I have projected my internal desire onto you as your desire, but I was aware of that projection. Everyone needs, well, let's have 20 minutes.
Okay. We on? On? Okay, it's time to put your cups aside. Here she swims. I think people interpreted that as it's now time to go to the toilet. Yeah, it's the cake. Yeah. So do find your way back to your mat. Thank you. You can tell which people are well-trained mamas. They're washing their cups.